Hi, my name is Vanessa Hartley. I currently live in Chicago, but I grew up in a suburb of Boulder, Colorado, and I'm going to be talking about how climate change has affected me there and what my climate story is when for the environment and climate in the suburb of Boulder where I grew up. I'm going to be talking about this because there was recently a natural disaster that took place. I believe it was in December of last year. There was a huge fire that destroyed a lot of my hometown, which was the Marshall Fire. It took place in Superior and Louisville, Colorado, which is where I grew up. I care about the climate in that area because I've seen natural disasters take place in the past year, and I was there and I was visiting when that all happened. So it really gave me a big emotional response and really made me want to do something to prevent climate change in the future. For a little bit of backstory, the fire took place in some neighborhoods or in some towns in Boulder County, which is Boulder and surrounding areas. And the fire destroyed more than 1,000 homes, and more than tens of thousands of residents had to evacuate. The fire does not have people are still not sure what caused the fire as of yet, at least from the information that I've found. They believe that it could have been either downed power lines, underground coal fires, or human activity. All of which, especially the downed power lines and the underground coal fires, really speak to how humans could have caused that through, their energy usage in Colorado. This fire was completely out of control. Colorado had a extremely dry dry winter. That led up to the fire. I believe that we had barely any snow. I think that it was less than 2 inches, which is pretty uncommon, and no rain, which is not super uncommon for Colorado. It's a very dry place, but having very little snow is somewhat noteworthy and definitely speaks to global warming, I believe, because typically at that time of year, the fire took place on December 30th. So at that point, we should have had much more snow than that, which really helped the fire grow and spread because the grasses and plains were so dry. The fire was able to just get some speed and keep going. There was also 100-mile-an-hour winds, which made the fire speed through towns. It jumped highways and completely destroyed many neighborhoods that I knew people that lived in. This definitely was a really, shocking experience. I had never experienced a natural disaster to that scale where I lived or that close to me. I personally, my family did not have to evacuate, but we just lived just a mile from the evacuation point. And many of my friends that I went to high school with, as well as my sister's friends, people that my family knew, did have to evacuate, and many of them lost their homes. The changing climate clearly caused a huge threat to our community because, a fire can start. That doesn't necessarily have to be a climate change thing, but the way that it was able to grow out of control and basically just had to run its course is something that that climate change definitely affected due to the extremely dry conditions and the high winds, as well as the man-made component to which started the fire, as for what we know right now. I think that seeing that happen, and then a few months later there was another fire that took place in Boulder that also was kind of spurred on by those same conditions of really dry weather and high winds, made me realize how this can kind of happen at any time, and our community is really threatened by fires, especially living in a dry location, that those fires can kind of happen and blow out of control and completely destroy our entire town, which is extremely sad, which brings me to emotional responses to climate change and, in my community. The number one emotional response that I have, or that I had at that point, was definitely fear. I think that seeing a natural disaster take place so close to you and so close to your home really sparked fear, because I think that up until that point I had thought, oh, this couldn't happen to me, which I think is a really common viewpoint for many people in the US that have not personally been affected by climate change in a large way, that they think it won't affect them. And I think that, those fires was really a wake-up call to me that this, can and will affect me and my loved ones, which definitely sparked a lot of fear, in me, and I think in the community. I think, of course, confusion was one of the bigger ones at the beginning, because I did feel confused on how something like this could happen and how a fire could just be completely not controlled, and just, that the people, like firefighters and the response teams to actions or to something like that happening, could be completely helpless. But as I did more research, it definitely made sense to me, because the fire was just moving so fast that there was not really anything that they were able to do to stop it, which again makes me feel fearful and makes me feel angry that climate change, can be so far out of our control, can cause a devastating event like that to happen, and there's not really anything that while the event is going on that we personally can do to stop it. I think that obviously there is a lot of sadness seeing some of my, the people that I grew up with lose their homes, and, feeling that empathy towards people. I think that I don't believe that anyone died from the fires, which is great, but definitely people lost their pets, people lost their homes and all of their belongings, and, were displaced I know people that still have not been able to return to their homes and are still, in a temporary living situation. And some of those people were not even, their homes were not burned down, they were just, affected by the fire, or slightly, had some damage done to them, which I think is definitely something that makes me want to, I would say it sparks some action, or makes me want to have some action to help them. There was a lot of, after the fires, there was a lot of crowdfunding to be able to help some people that were really struggling, help give money back to them so that they were able to buy new belongings, they were able to find a place to stay while, the kind of government and insurance were getting that all figured out, because that was not something that was, initially able to be implemented because of the large amount of homes that burned down and people that were displaced. I think that there was also a lot of really great, assistance done by the community in the way of clothes drives and school supply drives for students. Many of the schools in the area, especially, the school that most of the peoples whose homes burned down went to, there was a lot of great help from the community in donating things that they no longer needed, purchasing things for people just because they, obviously maybe had bigger things to worry about than, getting notebooks for school, and the community did a really great job in supporting them, and that definitely makes me feel, hopeful, that I'm glad that our community was able to bounce back so strongly. I think that in this specific scenario, I do think that the local government in Colorado has done a decent job of helping support people after the fire, which is not something that you see in a lot of places in the US. So I really appreciate that they have done, that they've worked to assist people and, make sure that even if they're not, in a new home right away, well, if, their home will take some time to get rebuilt, and, the devastation to, kind of get fixed, I guess is the best word. But they, it seems like most people were able to have a place to stay, which was good. Which also brings me to, ways that I can contribute to climate change and why I'm motivated to confront climate change. I am definitely super motivated to confront climate change. That's always been something that I've been really passionate about. I think that, I always love nature. I love to hike and camp and go out and see, all of the natural beauty of the earth. And I think that, hearing about climate change and how that's affected so many people as well as the environment where they live has been, it's very sad and very, definitely makes me want to fight against climate change and do what I personally can. I think that I'm obviously motivated as well, even more so than before, because of seeing this event happen in my community, and really wanting to, prevent something like that happening again. My family and I were extremely lucky that our house was okay, that, we did not have our house burned down or damaged by a fire, and that everyone we know is at least safe. No one was, no one died from the fire, and, people have been okay for the most part, at least physically, and able to recover. But I've also seen the, emotional turmoil that an event like this has taken on the community, and and obviously the loss of a family home is something that's extremely sad, and so I think that I definitely feel motivated to confront climate change so that something like this does not happen again, and doesn't happen in my own community, but also in everywhere else. I think that seeing the effects of this disaster on my community has given me even more empathy to people that have experienced natural disasters before, like in the California fires, and in the hurricanes that take place in Florida and many places in the South. I think that I feel I already felt empathy, but I feel even more now seeing how this has affected my community. I think that looking at how I personally can contribute a positive way forward, one of the main areas that I can do that is through political action. Recently, in the midterms that took place recently, there on the ballot there was some measures about that concerning the fire and how that happened, how we can prevent it in the future, with things talking about giving more money to firefighting and other resources that are the response teams for those fires, giving them more training on how they can best prevent or diminish the effects of something like this happening again, as well as allocating money to help people who are struggling financially from the fires, helping rebuild these neighborhoods that were completely burned to the ground. And that's something that I voted for because I think that that's super important in our community to have both of those things enacted. So that's one way where I felt I was, directly contributing a positive way to climate change, and or at least, helping the effects of that. Other than political action, there's definitely things that I personally can do by, trying to create less waste, trying to use less energy personally, all of that stuff. But I think that the biggest way to actually, create a noticeable difference is to educate others and talk about climate change with others. If it's just one person turning off the lights every time they leave a room, that is a very small effect, but if you can get a whole community of people doing that, if you can get everyone doing that, at least that has a little bit more of an effect. Even though I do think that political action is probably the most effective way to combat climate change, because most of the biggest issues of climate change, or the big things that we could make large differences on, are on these large scale things like corporations, manufacturing, transportation, all of that, that it's not, it's difficult for the individual to make, a direct change. But I think that the more that we spread awareness, more people can vote for those things and have, look into what candidates are saying about climate change. And then, eventually we can all, as a community, as a United States, try to vote in favor of things that will help prevent, confront, stop or reverse climate change. Thank you.